insurance purposes that it's related to as a mental illness. But I don't believe it's a mental illness. I believe it's a condition created by the way we think. Both anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression is not what we are feeling. You know, if somebody asks you how you feel, oh, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed. It's not really accurate. It's not so much what we are feeling, it's what we're not feeling. It's what we're not expressing. And part of what we're going to be talking about is, later on, is anxiety happens for people who are not taught very well growing up, I certainly wasn't, how to use our God-given gift of emotion. We need emotions in our life. It's what gives life color. But if we're not taught how to use those emotions, they get denied. And then life loses its color. So part of what I teach people in my program is how to utilize their God-given emotions so that life has color. It's enjoyable, as opposed to just living with the blinders on, no real highs, no real lows. Does that answer your question? Sort of?
Well, he has a question.
Okay, yes. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Yeah. More as time goes on. Anything else? Okay. Not quite sure what's next, so I'll just answer whatever's up on the. Oh, my story. How did I get into this? Well, I was suffering with anxiety and depression. Wasn't intentional. I was a therapist. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I had been suffering with anxiety and depression for some time. And people had suggested over a long period of time for me to get some help for myself. And I thought, oh God, I'm a therapist. I don't need to go in for that. But it became more and more pronounced. And I became more and more miserable. And finally, I decided to go in and get some help for myself. Still kicking and screaming. And there was no specialist. It was very inefficient. Spent a lot of butt hours across from my therapist. But the difference that it made in my life was so profound that as I approached the end of my treatment at that point, I went back for other issues later on. I'm a very neurotic person. But it was so profound that I decided that's really what I want to do with my practices. I'd like to give this same hope to other people. But I thought, according to the Surgeon General, that maybe I'd see 10 or 15 people along the years that would suffer with this, and that was 3,000 people. That's all I work with. And you probably understand why that's all I've worked with when I'm the only person in the three-state area. But still, even in Rapid City, I'm just picking the bottom fruit, the ripe fruit. There's so many people that are not getting the help that they need because I haven't figured out a way to clone myself or to intrigue other people enough to get them trained. And I would like to coordinate with Avera or McKinnon or any of the other hospitals on this side of the state so that we could get people some help locally. But it didn't happen. So that's kind of my story. I didn't do it intentionally. I didn't go into graduate school thinking I'm going to go work with people with anxiety at that point. In fact, that was the first time that I went into the doctor's office at the San Diego State, and they did all the tests, the poking and the probing, and I was so proud. I got my first colonoscopy at 23 years old. or 22 years old. And they said, Mr. Briggs, you have a nervous stomach. I said, I'm not even nervous. That's just how out of touch I was. We don't recognize it. It's not intentional. We simply don't recognize it. It doesn't go with the image that we want to portray. So that's how I got into this. And it's continues to be an incredibly rewarding work. Lots of gravy along the way when you get to travel on other people's dimes, but just incredible. The chance to touch people's lives, start seeing people that have created all sorts of artificial limits on their life, beginning to smile, beginning to feel comfortable in their own skin, their marriages and their families beginning to get along better. It's pretty rewarding. Okay. Let's talk about the overall concept. What is it that creates this mess? What is it that we can learn so that we just don't do this to ourselves, or excuse me, that we can manage it better first? And ultimately, what can be learned so that I just don't do this to myself in the future? And what I'm going to be sharing with you here in this morning session is just precisely what I talk with people about during the first time that I meet with people, the very first session that we have. I give them this outline, and I do it intentionally because I want them, number one, I want them to hear this before I get to know them. I want them, instead of meeting with them for a while and then giving them this information, they think, well, you're just using it against me. I want to share it all with them so that they know up front. Many of those people say, I resemble this information. This you're describing me. Well, yes, this is a well-trodden path. People who I've presented 19 times at the National Convention for those of us who specialize throughout the world now. It's become an international organization. And not only is it wonderful and onerous to be able to be selected to speak year after year, but you get a chance to listen to the leading researchers in the world around this area. You get a chance to talk to psychiatrists and therapists from all over the place that are devoting their lives to this, and you get to exchange ideas. It's quite an experience. But part of what we're finding is that people who suffer with anxiety are very sensitive people, very emotional people. Doesn't mean that they know how to share their emotions, but they're people who are very emotional people, very creative, intelligent people, very ambitious, somewhat suggestive. When they feel safe, they tend to like people. But when they don't feel safe, they tend to withdraw, and everything gets really, really serious. And you can pick and choose from all those personality characteristics, but everyone who suffers with excessive anxiety is a perfectionist. So why do I work with dentists? Why do I work with dentists? Why do I work with physicians, nurses, teachers? We've got this great personality, and they really are wonderful personalities. But we're using those personalities temporarily, directly against ourselves. We're scaring the hell out of ourselves. We're making ourselves miserable. And that's the good news. The good news is those are great personality traits, and we're using it against ourselves. Because the alternative belief around anxiety is that it's caused by situations. People think flying causes anxiety. Giving presentations cause anxiety. Meeting new people cause anxiety. Being in closed spaces causes anxiety. Driving causes anxiety. None of those things cause anxiety. It's our thinking when we're in those situations that causes our anxiety. And that is great. Because truly, if it were those situations that cause our anxiety, then inevitably, you just need to avoid those situations, and as life goes on, you just avoid more and more until your life gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's a lot of people that live their life that way. Probably the 40 million per year that are not diagnosed are living their life avoiding things. And if we can learn to change our thinking, which we can, then we can do any darn thing we want to. Because we are, back to that personality type, we are very capable people. We're very intelligent people. But we are using it temporarily. Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I understand what you're saying about driving not causing anxiety, but I mean, like, if you're going to a hearing and you're representing a mom whose parental rights are going to be terminated, to me, that's a situation that does cause anxiety. I mean, am I wrong? Or?
Okay, that probably gets back to Henry's question before that we will get to. What's the difference between normal anxiety and excessive anxiety? Yes, we do have anxiety in our life, and we do need to know the difference. So hold that one. Any other thoughts about this personality type? Know anybody that this describes? Now is when we talk about that question. What is the difference between healthy versus unnecessary anxiety? There are 4 things that healthy anxiety is there to do for us, and we need them in our life. The first is safety. Without healthy anxiety, we would literally be living our lives unsafely. It's a beautiful drive yesterday. Driving out here, I was impressed that I never saw a pheasant. Scary. Drove all the way from Rapid, I never saw a pheasant. Not one. Saw a lot of what looked like used to be corn. Looked more like popcorn. But yeah, we need healthy anxiety in our life, and obviously yesterday was gorgeous weather. But if it would have been January, February, and there would have been ice and snow on the ground, which there typically is, and you'd have come to this presentation, and as you started off, your car would have slipped and slid a little bit. That would have been normal. What do you think your anxiety is trying to convey to you?
Slow down.
Slow down. Just be vigilant. Not hyper-vigilant, but vigilant. Just be careful. So we need anxiety in our life. That would be a form of normal, healthy anxiety that it's not good to go without it. The second thing that anxiety does is to mobilize our body in response to danger. Clearly, a very important thing too. We've all heard of the fight or flight syndrome. That's where this comes in. And had we been cave people, it was always smart when you were going out to gather food to take your club with you. a smart thing to go without your club. Probably made it into a necklace just so you could keep it with you. But as we went out to gather food, it was a good chance that we'd see saber-toothed tigers. Well, lo and behold, there's that saber-toothed tiger. Now you've got a choice. You either use the club or you throw it and run like the Dickens. When we were in that age, we either ran or we fought. What do we do now when we are anxious? Usually, nothing. It just sits and stews in our bodies. We use our creative mind to come up with theories about what actually caused it, most of which are crap, by the way. But we have all these theories going on, and we sit there and we regurgitate. We obsess. And this is particularly important for people who suffer with excessive anxiety, our body responds the same to real and imagined danger. So, if I go over and over and over and over and over again an argument that I anticipate having with someone, or if I'm going over a case in my mind, actually there was an attorney that was in one of my programs one time, and he said, "Man, this helps me to realize why I'm so short with my kids. They don't realize that I'm constantly in battle with my clients." He didn't recognize it before, because most of our thinking, we've been practicing it for so long, it's unconscious. We don't even recognize what we're thinking. But we're always thinking. Even when we're sleeping, we're thinking. That's when rapid eye movement comes in and we're dreaming. Anybody here ever woken up from a dream upset? Okay. What has happened at that point is that our eye movement has gotten interrupted. We don't even know why our eyes move when we're sleeping. But somehow it does indicate when we're in deep REM sleep. And when we wake up and we're upset, sad, angry, scared, it's when our eye movement has stopped. Now that's interesting because one of the things that when I went out to present at the national conference, a colleague of mine suggested, "Rex, you really need to come to this training that we're doing." He was on the board of what's called EMDR. Write down those four numbers, or 4 letters. EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing. It's a technique that was developed out in Stanford, professor out at Stanford. And I was able, because of my connections with Ron, I was able to have lunch with her when I got the training. And EMDR helps people to work through traumas. And we all go through traumas. They may be minor or they may be major, but we all go through traumas. And traumas that lead to a belief system, an I statement that we then persistently beat ourselves up with. I'll give you an example. There was a woman that I worked with, she and her husband. I just absolutely adored this couple. They went through my program together. They both got involved in an ongoing group, and they were just both wonderful people. And I often check the obituaries because a lot of clients die. Well, I never expected Mark to die because he was my age at the time. He was 40 years old. And so as soon as I saw that in the paper, I hopped in my pickup and I ran over to her house. And of course, she was there with her family. She threw open the door and she just threw her arms around me. She said, "Rex, we were supposed to leave tomorrow for our honeymoon that never happened 19 years ago. You know, had it not been for you, we wouldn't have been going on the darn thing. He was supposed to turn 50 tomorrow, and we were going to celebrate by going on this." And she found him blue. She was at EMT training, and she tried to bring him as I sat there with her, I just said, well, how are you doing? She goes, I can't sleep. I can't even think about Mark without all these horrible, without seeing him there blue. And I said, well, that ain't good. I'm going to give you a call in a couple weeks, and if you're still struggling with this, I'd like to maybe share this technique with you. So I called her back in a couple of weeks, and she still wasn't sleeping, and she still couldn't think of Mark pleasantly. And I brought her into my office, and after 10 minutes of doing EMDR, this is not typical, but after doing 10 minutes of EMDR, she finally started smiling, and she said, my God, I can think of him warmly. I can think of good memories of him. So the EMDR helps us to process through traumas that keep us stuck. We keep re-traumatizing ourselves time and time and time and time again. And the EMDR simply helps them to come up with new positive belief systems kind of spontaneously. So it's a cool technique. It's not a replacement for therapy, but it's, if therapy keeps getting stuck, what can you do to get people through it so you can get them on with their therapy? So our body is there with healthy anxiety to mobilize us in response to danger, but we have to figure out when is the danger real and when is it imagined? When is it just danger in our mind? Let's use your illustration. Tell me more about how that might relate to this, or does it?
You mean having the hearing that will give you anxiety? Well, I can see what you're saying. I guess from my perspective, if I were in my client's shoes, I wouldn't want an attorney who didn't feel anxiety, representing me in that circumstance. And I feel that way, like when I do a trial. I wouldn't, if I don't feel that, then I maybe shouldn't be doing trials anymore because it is important to help function.
Well, part of what you're describing is the same thing. I played football in high school and college, and before a game, when you're beating each other up and slapping helmets and beating your head against the lockers and you're sweating, that's what you're doing, is you're getting healthy anxiety, getting ready to perform. So exactly, that's true. We need to have some healthy anxiety to get us ready to perform. But, okay, go ahead with Chris.
Well, the part to me that's unhealthy is, if you can't sleep, 3 weeks before the trial, that's not the kind of anxiety to do the trial. That's just you doubting yourself.
Now, exactly. We're going to be talking about a lot of illustrations today, helping you to understand how we create this mess for ourselves. But part of what I've learned after 35 years of doing this now is that every area that we have excessive anxiety about are areas that we don't have self-confidence in that particular area. We question, do I have what it takes to get this done? We have areas, most all of us have areas that we feel tremendously confident about. We all have, because we're all human, we all have areas that we second guess ourselves. We wonder, do I have what it takes? I don't trust me in that area. And those are the areas that I'm looking for as a therapist, because those are the very areas I want to help you to establish more self-confidence. The attorneys that I've worked with learn to break things down so that they know what to do. But I can tell you, as we said before already, we need to face those areas, because the more we avoid those areas, the more our self-confidence plummets. So facing the areas allows us to learn. And if I am incredibly anxious as I'm doing that, probably I'm taking too big a steps. It's not that I, because the words that we arrive at when we're anxious is I can't. Right? I can't. And as soon as we say I can't, I'm posed. Because as soon as I arrive at the belief that I can't, it's a trap. And there's three things that are at the bottom of every human being's anxiety. Every human being. Related to the same thing. Number one, feeling trapped. Number two, feeling out of control. And number three, what will other people think? Those three things. You take anything that people are anxious about, and you can bring them down to those three common denominators. Now, for some people, it's one over and over and over again. For others, it's a mixture of all three. But those three are, that's exactly what we need to figure out. So, our body is mobilizing us